Barron Trump surprises high school janitor with SUV. What happened next will leave you in tears. In a heartwarming twist that no one saw coming, Barron Trump, the son of former President Donald Trump, stepped into a high school like no other day. But it wasn't for a photo op or a political appearance. It was for a janitor who had no idea what was about to happen next. Imagine working hard every day, cleaning hallways, mopping floors, and never asking for anything in return. Then one day, out of the blue, your life changes forever. What Barron did next will not only leave you shocked, but will have you reaching for the tissues. This story isn't about politics. It's about kindness, generosity, and a simple act of gratitude that proves the power of a good deed. Stay tuned because what happens next will leave you speechless. You won't believe what Barron Trump does for a hardworking janitor. Trust us, you'll want to see it all the way through. It was just another typical day at the high school. Students rushing between classes, teachers preparing lessons, and the janitor quietly doing his work. For years, he'd been there, unnoticed by most, his routine a silent sacrifice for the school's cleanliness. But little did he know, that day would be different. Barron Trump, now a young man, had walked into the school without any fanfare, but what he was about to do would send shockwaves through everyone. This wasn't a celebrity visit, and it wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a simple act of kindness. This janitor, who had spent countless hours making sure everything was in order, had no idea that the son of one of the most famous figures in the world was about to completely change his life. What happened next? You won't believe it. Keep watching because what comes next will make you see the power of kindness in a whole new light. Gary's life followed a rhythm, a routine shaped by years of working at the local high school. For him, it wasn't just about the tasks. It was about the commitment, the pride in a job well done, and the connection with the students and staff. Every day he would arrive early, long before the first bell rang, when the halls were quiet and still, the air filled with the promise of a new day. His first task was always the same, unlocking the school doors. As the sun barely peeked over the horizon, Gary would step into the building, its empty corridors echoing with the sound of his footsteps. He would head straight to the cafeteria, where the breakfast trays needed to be prepped for the students, and then to the classrooms, where the desks had to be wiped down and the floors cleaned. Each space he entered became a little cleaner, a little brighter, thanks to his meticulous work. Gary's job wasn't glamorous, but he took pride in it. While others saw cleaning as a menial task, he saw it as an opportunity to make the school a better place for everyone. His routine involved constant movement, sweeping, mopping, dusting, and sanitizing every surface. He worked quickly but with a quiet efficiency, often humming a tune to himself as he went about his day. He took his breaks in the janitor's closet, a small room at the end of the hall, where he would sit with a simple cup of coffee. It wasn't much, but it was his time to recharge. Most of the students were still in class, so the halls would be quiet, and Gary would take a few moments to breathe and gather his thoughts. He would often think about his life outside the school, the family he supported, and the small things that brought him joy. As the students began to fill the halls, Gary would move seamlessly into the background. The hum of voices, the laughter, and the occasional shout of excitement filled the school. But Gary never minded. He'd learned to appreciate the sounds of life in the school, the chatter, the movement, the energy. These moments reminded him that his work contributed to creating a safe and clean environment for these young people. And that kept him going, day after day. Lunchtime was always a busy time for Gary. While students and teachers filled the cafeteria, he would be moving through the halls, ensuring everything was in place. A spilled drink here, a forgotten napkin there. He would swiftly clean them up without a second thought. His routine was mostly unnoticed by the students, but every now and then, a curious glance or a nod of thanks from a teacher reminded him that his efforts were valued. It was these small acknowledgments that fueled him to keep going. In the afternoons, Gary would make his rounds again, checking every hallway, bathroom, and classroom for any messes that had accumulated. The school had its own rhythm, and so did Gary. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, his work didn't stop. He would stay after hours cleaning the spaces that had been used throughout the day. The gymnasium, the classrooms, the restrooms, they all needed his attention. He would mop the floors, sanitize the surfaces, and ensure everything was spotless before locking the doors behind him. Though the work was physically demanding and often thankless, Gary never complained. It was his routine, and it was a routine that he had come to respect and cherish. It was the foundation of his day, the structure that helped him stay grounded, and the way he made a difference in his small corner of the world. His work wasn't flashy, but it was necessary, and Gary took pride in knowing that by the end of each day, he had made a lasting impact on the students' experiences at the school. The routine also gave him a sense of stability, a feeling of being needed. Though many saw him only as the janitor, Gary knew that he played a key role in the school's daily operations. Without his work, things would fall apart quickly. Clutter would accumulate, messes would pile up, and the environment would become less welcoming. His efforts ensured that the school remained a clean and safe place for the students to learn, and that was something he valued deeply. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Gary's routine became more than just a set of tasks. It became a part of who he was. It was in the way he moved through the hallways, the way he greeted teachers and students with a smile, and the way he approached his work with a quiet dedication. The school in many ways had become his second home, and the students and staff had become his extended family. Despite the long hours and the often unseen work, Gary never grew tired of his routine. He didn't do it for the praise or the recognition. He did it because he cared. The school was a place where students came to learn, grow, and shape their futures, and he wanted to ensure that it was always a place where they felt safe and comfortable. In his own way, Gary was making a difference, and that made all the hard work worthwhile. Each day as the sun set and he prepared to leave for the night, Gary would lock the doors behind him and take a deep breath. He was proud of what he had accomplished, knowing that his routine, though simple, played an essential part in the larger picture. The school would be ready for another day, thanks to his efforts, and the students would have a clean, welcoming space to return to. And with that, Gary could rest, knowing that he had done his part once again. It was an ordinary Wednesday morning when the unexpected happened. Gary, the janitor of the local high school, was going about his usual routine, sweeping the hallways and ensuring the school remained spotless. The halls were quiet at first, with students still in their early classes. He was used to the calm during this time of day, where the weight of the job felt light, and the satisfaction of a clean school was his only company. But that morning, something felt different. Gary was wiping down the benches near the school's entrance when he heard the soft, almost inaudible hum of a car pulling into the parking lot. He didn't think much of it at first. Perhaps it was just another visitor, or maybe a delivery truck. But then the doors swung open, and a familiar face walked through the hallway, catching his eye. It was Barron Trump, the youngest member of one of the most famous families in the world. Gary froze for a moment, unsure of what he was seeing. Barron, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, looked more like any other teenager on a visit than a member of the Trump family. His calm demeanor and humble attire were in stark contrast to the fame and fortune associated with his last name. Gary stood still, unsure whether to approach, but Barron had already noticed him. With a slight smile and a wave, Barron made his way over to Gary, who was still processing the fact that the son of a former president was standing right before him. "Hey," Barron said casually, his voice calm but friendly. "You're the janitor, right?" Gary nodded, unsure of what to say. "Yeah, I'm Gary. How can I help you, son?" Barron looked around, taking in the school's halls, the classrooms, the posters on the walls. "I just wanted to stop by and thank you for all the work you do here," he said. "I know it's not an easy job, and you probably don't get enough recognition for it." Gary blinked, trying to process the young man's words. He had been in this school for years and had seen many faces, but never had he expected a visit like this from someone with Barron's background. For a moment, Gary wasn't sure how to respond, but Barron's genuine kindness made him feel at ease. "I just do my part," Gary replied, shrugging. "It's a job like any other. The kids here deserve a clean place to study, so I make sure they get it." Barron nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly, and it makes a huge difference. I bet the students here appreciate it more than they let on." Gary smiled modestly, not used to such praise. "Thanks, kid. That means a lot." Barron seemed to think for a moment before continuing. Actually, I wanted to do something for you today. Something a little special. Gary raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Barron glanced around to make sure no one was looking, and then pulled out a small envelope from his jacket pocket. He handed it to Gary, who hesitated before taking it. As soon as the envelope touched his hands, he realized it wasn't just a note or card. It was a gift. Gary opened the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled out a key fob and a piece of paper with an address written on it. The key fob gleamed in the light, and the address on the paper was for a car dealership in town. Wait a minute, Gary said, looking up at Barron in disbelief. Is this? Yep, Barron interrupted with a grin. It's for you. I know things have been tough, and I wanted to do something to help out. You've worked hard here for so many years, and I think it's time you get something nice for yourself. Gary couldn't believe what he was hearing. A new car? For him? From Barron Trump? It was all so surreal. He had never even dreamed of owning something like that, let alone receiving it as a gift from someone he had never met before. But Barron's genuine smile told him that this wasn't some kind of joke. I don't know what to say, Gary stammered. This is too much. I don't deserve something like this. Barron shook his head, a look of determination in his eyes. You absolutely do. You've been taking care of this school for so long, making sure everything's running smoothly. It's time someone did something nice for you. Gary was speechless, the weight of the gift finally sinking in. A brand new SUV, something he never thought he could afford, was now his. He felt a lump form in his throat, and his eyes welled up with tears. He had never experienced such generosity before. Thank you, Gary finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. This means more to me than you could ever know. Barron smiled, his eyes warm and kind. It's nothing. You deserve it. For a long moment they stood there in silence, the weight of the gesture hanging in the air. Gary had no idea what he had done to deserve such kindness, but in that moment it didn't matter. All he knew was that a young man, someone with a life most people could only dream of, had taken the time to think of him, to show him that he mattered. And as Barron turned to leave, Gary looked at the key fob in his hand and realized that this simple, unexpected visit had changed his life forever. Gary stood there holding the key fob in his hand, still trying to process the unbelievable turn of events. Barron had handed him the keys to a brand new SUV, but there was something more in the air, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Barron's visit was already beyond anything Gary had ever imagined, but now, as he stared at the key fob, there was a nagging sense that there was more to this gift than met the eye. At first, Gary assumed that Barron's gesture was simply a generous act, an attempt to make his day better. But the more he thought about it, the more it felt like there was something bigger behind it, a deeper meaning, a purpose that hadn't yet been revealed. Was Barron just being kind, or was there something more he was trying to convey through this unexpected surprise? It wasn't long before Gary would find out. As he stood there looking down at the key fob, Barron spoke again, his voice calm but carrying an air of significance. There's one more thing I need to tell you, Barron said, his eyes meeting Gary's. The car, it's not just a gift, it's part of something bigger. I wanted to give you something that would change your life, but I also wanted to show you something important. Gary looked up at Barron, confused. What do you mean? I don't understand. Barron took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. I know life hasn't always been easy for you, Gary. I've been paying attention. I've seen the way you show up every single day, no matter what. And I know that you've never asked for anything, but sometimes people like you, people who give so much and ask for so little, deserve to be seen. You deserve to know that you matter. Gary's heart skipped a beat. He had always tried to do his best, never expecting recognition or rewards. He just wanted to do his job and take care of the school. But now, standing in front of Barron, he realized that there was something bigger going on here. Barron's words were more than just kind. They carried weight, a sense of purpose that was hard to ignore. Barron continued, his voice softer now, almost as if he were speaking from the heart. You see, I've been talking to my family about you, about how hard you work, how dedicated you are. And I wanted to show you that your efforts don't go unnoticed. But it's not just about the car. It's about showing you that there's always a way forward, no matter what you've been through. Gary stood there speechless as Barron's words sank in. He had always felt like just another person, another face in the crowd. But Barron was telling him that he had been noticed, that his hard work had mattered to someone who didn't have to care, but chose to. Barron paused for a moment, allowing Gary to process what he had said. I've seen the way you struggle sometimes. You've worked so hard for so long, and I know things haven't always been easy. But I want you to know that you don't have to carry that weight alone anymore. You have support. You have people who see you. Gary's mind raced as the realization hit him. This wasn't just a random act of kindness. It was Barron's way of telling him that he wasn't invisible, that his efforts had been recognized, that his story mattered. Gary felt a lump form in his throat as emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel before began to rise to the surface. "But why me?" Gary finally asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why are you doing this for me?" Barron smiled, his gaze steady and sincere. "Because you've earned it. Because you're not just a janitor to me. You're a person who deserves better. And if I can help make that happen, even in the smallest way, then I will." Gary couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had worked hard his entire life, never expecting anything in return. But here was Barron Trump, offering not just a car, but something far more valuable, a sense of recognition, of validation, of knowing that his efforts had made a difference. The more Barron spoke, the more Gary realized that this wasn't just a material gift. It was an emotional one, a gift that would stay with him for the rest of his life. It was a reminder that no matter who you were or where you came from, you mattered. It was a message that, no matter how small the gesture, kindness had the power to change lives. As Barron finished speaking, Gary felt tears well up in his eyes. He had never expected to receive such a profound gift from someone he barely knew. But now, standing in the hallway of the high school, he understood that this was about more than just a new car. It was about showing someone that they were seen, that they were valued, and that their hard work had not gone unnoticed. Gary stood in silence for a moment, trying to absorb everything Barron had shared. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you enough. You've changed my life today. I don't even know if I deserve this, but I'm so grateful." Barron's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with kindness. "You do deserve it. You've earned it, Gary. And remember, this is just the beginning. You have a future ahead of you, and it's going to be bright." With that, Barron turned and walked out of the school, leaving Gary standing there stunned and overwhelmed by the unexpected reveal. In that moment, Gary realized that sometimes the most powerful gifts weren't the ones you could hold in your hands, but the ones that touched your heart and changed your life forever. Gary stood there still holding the key fob in his hand as Barron's words sank in. His heart raced in his chest, and he felt a wave of emotions that he could barely comprehend. He looked down at the shiny new keys, their weight in his palm now symbolizing something far more significant than just the vehicle they unlocked. It was as if time had slowed down in those few moments, and Gary couldn't quite grasp the reality of what was happening. For years, he had worked tirelessly, putting in countless hours of effort, cleaning, mopping, fixing things around the school, all while remaining largely unnoticed by most of the students, faculty, and even the administration. It wasn't that he minded. It was simply his job, and he took pride in doing it well. But deep down, there were times when Gary wondered if anyone truly saw him, if his quiet dedication ever made a difference. And now here he was, holding the keys to an SUV, a gift from none other than Barron Trump himself. It felt surreal, like a dream he couldn't wake up from. Gary's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this really happening? Did Barron Trump, the son of a former president, just give him a new car? The whole scenario felt completely out of place for someone like Gary. He felt a lump form in his throat, and his eyes began to sting with unshed tears. It wasn't just about the car. It wasn't even about the gesture itself, though that in itself was incredible. It was the deeper meaning behind it all, the recognition, the acknowledgement, the fact that someone had seen his hard work and chosen to do something to make a difference in his life. Gary had spent his entire career working in the background, often overlooked, often underappreciated. But this moment was different. Barron's words, the way he spoke to him as though he were an equal, resonated deeply with Gary. In that instant, he realized how much this simple act of kindness meant to him. He had never asked for recognition, never sought validation, but to have someone, especially someone like Barron, acknowledge his efforts in such a profound way, it was overwhelming. Gary felt a wave of gratitude surge through him, mingled with a deep sense of humility. How could he ever thank Barron enough for such a generous gesture? There were no words that could fully capture the depth of his emotions. Gary had always been a man of few words, preferring to let his actions speak for him. But this was something he had never experienced before. As Barron stood there, patiently watching him, Gary finally managed to speak, his voice thick with emotion. I, I don't know what to say, he muttered, struggling to keep himself together. His hands shook slightly as he held the key fob, as though the weight of the moment was too much for him to bear. Barron smiled, a reassuring and kind smile that seemed to ease some of Gary's tension. You don't have to say anything, Gary. Just know that you're appreciated and that you deserve this. Barron's words felt like a balm to Gary's soul, soothing the raw emotion he was experiencing. It was a recognition he had never expected, but one he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Gary nodded, his throat tight as he tried to suppress the tears threatening to fall. His eyes glanced at the shiny new car parked outside the school, and for the first time in years, he felt like he had been given an opportunity, a chance to move forward. It wasn't just about the car, it was about the message behind it, the message that his hard work, his quiet dedication, had not gone unnoticed, that he mattered. As the tears welled up in Gary's eyes, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It wasn't just the car, it was the love and kindness that Barron had shown him in that single, unexpected moment. He had touched Gary's life in a way that words could never fully express. Gary's heart swelled with emotion, and for a moment, he found it difficult to breathe. I don't deserve this, Gary whispered, more to himself than to Barron. But Barron quickly shook his head, placing a hand gently on Gary's shoulder. Yes, you do, Barron said softly. You've worked so hard for so long. You've given so much of yourself to this school and to the people around you. This is just a small way for me to show you that your efforts don't go unnoticed. You matter, Gary, and I wanted to make sure you know that. Gary looked up at Barron, a mixture of awe and disbelief on his face. His chest felt tight with emotion, and he was still struggling to fully process everything. He never imagined that a simple day at work would lead to something so life-changing. It was as if the universe had aligned to deliver him a message, one that he would carry with him for the rest of his days. In that moment, Gary knew that his life had been forever changed. The new SUV was just the beginning. It was the first step in a journey that would lead him toward greater things, greater opportunities, and greater recognition. But more than anything, it was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness had the power to change a person's life forever. As he stood there trying to compose himself, Gary's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen, truly valued. And in that moment, he realized that kindness, real, genuine kindness, had the power to heal, to uplift, and to change the course of someone's life in an instant. Gary's life had been altered in a way that he never thought possible. And while the new car was an obvious, tangible symbol of change, it was the ripple effect of Barron's kindness that truly began to reverberate through Gary's world. It wasn't just about the car. It was about what that simple gesture set in motion, how it touched not only Gary's life, but the lives of others around him in profound and lasting ways. In the days that followed Barron's visit, Gary found himself reflecting on the significance of the moment more and more. His colleagues at the school were still in disbelief when they heard the news. Word spread like wildfire, how Barron Trump, the son of a former president, had personally visited the school and given a car to the humble janitor. They couldn't believe it, but the story became a beacon of inspiration. It was a reminder that acts of kindness, no matter how grand or small, could change the course of a person's life. And it wasn't just Gary who had been affected. The entire school began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. Gary's co-workers, who had always admired his dedication, but perhaps never truly understood the struggles he faced, now saw him in a new light. They were inspired by Barron's gesture, and they began to treat Gary with more respect, admiration, and compassion. The janitor, who had once been quietly invisible, now became a symbol of the powerful impact of kindness. Teachers and staff members, who had previously passed him by with only a quick nod or a passing hello, now took the time to engage with him, to ask how he was doing, and to offer their support. It wasn't just at work where the ripple effect of Barron's kindness began to unfold. Gary's family, who had long known of his tireless work ethic and humble spirit, were in awe of what had happened. His wife, Maria, could hardly contain her excitement when she heard the news. She had always supported Gary through thick and thin, but even she couldn't believe that something so remarkable could happen to their family. The SUV wasn't just a car to them, it was a symbol of hope, of possibilities, and of a brighter future. It gave Gary a renewed sense of purpose and drive, and that energy rippled through his home as well. His children, who had often seen their father leave early in the morning and return late at night, now looked at him with a new sense of pride. They knew their dad was a hard-working man, but they had never fully understood the sacrifices he had made to provide for them. Barron's act of kindness gave Gary the opportunity to share his story with his children in a way he never had before. He told them about the challenges he had faced, the days when he felt invisible, and the moments when he doubted whether his efforts were making any difference at all. But now, with the SUV in the driveway, Gary could show his children that kindness and hard work do get noticed. He could demonstrate that even the smallest of gestures could lead to incredible changes. Gary's friends, too, were inspired by Barron's kindness. Over the years, Gary had always been the one to lend a hand, to offer advice, and to help his friends through their struggles. But now they were the ones reaching out to him. They saw how the unexpected gesture had changed Gary's outlook on life, and it made them rethink how they treated others. People who had once taken Gary's quiet demeanor for granted now started to see him as a person to be respected, admired, and cherished. It wasn't just about the car, it was about the way Barron had treated Gary with kindness, respect, and genuine care. Perhaps most importantly, the ripple effect of Barron's kindness began to affect Gary's attitude toward others. In the past, Gary had often kept to himself, not expecting much from the world. But now he found himself wanting to pay that kindness forward. He started looking for ways to help those around him, to offer encouragement and support, just as Barron had done for him. It wasn't always in grand gestures. Sometimes it was just a kind word, a smile, or a simple act of consideration. But to Gary, those small acts meant everything. Gary's newfound sense of gratitude and compassion began to shape his daily interactions with others. He found himself more patient, more understanding, and more willing to listen to the struggles of those around him. He was no longer the quiet, invisible janitor. He was someone who recognized the power of kindness, someone who believed that even the smallest act could create a ripple that spread far and wide. And as that ripple continued to spread, more and more people began to embrace the idea that kindness was not only about receiving, but also about giving. Gary's story became a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter our station in life. It didn't matter whether we were rich or poor, famous or unknown. The impact of a kind gesture could transform a life in ways we could never fully understand. In the months that followed, Gary found himself growing more confident, more connected, and more at peace with his place in the world. He no longer felt invisible. He knew that his hard work had been noticed, that his efforts had mattered, and that, in some way, his life had been touched by something greater than himself. And as Gary's life continued to flourish, he made a promise to himself that he would never stop paying forward the kindness that had so radically changed his world. The ripple effect of Barron's kindness had only just begun. It would continue to spread, creating a chain of goodwill that touched lives, uplifted spirits, and reminded people everywhere that kindness, in its purest form, had the power to change the world. Gary's life was never the same after that day. What started as a simple act of kindness from Barron Trump blossomed into a powerful chain of events that transformed not just Gary's world, but the community around him. It was a reminder that even the smallest gestures can have profound, lasting effects. Barron's unexpected visit and thoughtful gift didn't just change Gary's circumstances, it ignited a spirit of kindness that spread through the school and beyond. In a world where the extraordinary often feels out of reach, this act of generosity showed that true greatness comes from empathy and compassion. And as for Gary, he carried Barron's lesson with him every day, that a little kindness can go a long way, touching hearts and creating ripples that last forever. If you were moved by Barron's incredible act of kindness, don't forget to hit that like button and share this story with your friends. It's stories like these that remind us all of the power of kindness and how it can change lives. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that inspire and touch your soul. Your support helps us bring more positive content to the world. So leave a comment below and let us know what you think. How would you have reacted in Gary's shoes? Let's keep the conversation going and spread the message of kindness far and wide.